The national average for smoking among adults is about 20%. We're about 23%. Exercise, less than 50% of adults in Michigan exercise 20 minutes 3 times a week. And that survey, they counted walking and gardening and vacuuming. So less than half of Michigan adults even do that much. So no wonder we have, so many problems with obesity, diabetes, asthma, heart disease. I mean, so it really reflects our behaviors. And if you want to get healthcare costs under control, we've got to look at our own behaviors that are contributing to the increase.
And you've made some important, I think, steps in the right direction with some of the legislation that you've added.
With your help.
Well, with my help, absolutely, because what you're doing is saying we can reduce costs, which we all need, and you've made that case right now. We can reduce costs if we engage in healthy behaviors. That brings us really now to the forefront of what's going on, what's taking a lot of our energy and effort right now to look at reform of the healthcare market. I know it seems to polarize around Blue Cross Blue Shield, but it's larger than just Blue Cross Blue Shield. I want you to share with my constituents just what's been
before us today.
And what you're doing. Let them become educated, please.
Let me give you a quick review of some of the things we did, and then I'll tell you what's before us. First, your viewers should know that it was against the law in Michigan, against the law for an insurance company to give a business that's buying insurance for their employees, it was against the law for them to give them a discount if their employees completed health screenings, smoked less, and exercised more. That was against the law. They couldn't consider behaviors. That was dumb. So we fixed that. And
thank you.
Governor Granholm signed that 2 years ago, and it's gone into effect. So now businesses, when they're buying insurance for their employees, they can shop around, and they can, if they can get their employees to be participants, to complete health screenings, smoke less, exercise more, they can get a discount, and they can pass that on to the employees, maybe in the form of a lower co-payments or lower premiums. So that's something we did already. Now the question before us today that's in the legislature has to do with a part of the insurance market called the individual market. Most people that have insurance, and by the way, in Michigan, we're actually blessed in that more people in Michigan have insurance than the average in other states. We have a problem with the uninsured. It's about 10% or 11% in Michigan, whereas the national average is 16 or 17. So even though we have a lot of uninsured, it's a smaller amount than in other states. Most people with insurance then get it through their employer. But there are some people who buy it on their own. Maybe they're self-employed, or maybe they retired early and they don't have health benefits. So they're in what we call the individual market. These are people who, it would be like buying your auto insurance. They pick up the phone and I'm trying to get insurance for myself and my family, and they shop around and they look for the best deal. That's the individual market, and we have bills in front of us having to do with regulating how that market would work. The current setup is this. If you're making those phone calls and you call private companies, they will ask you to fill out a questionnaire where you will report your health status. It's kind of like auto insurance. They're going to look at your driving record. You know, what is your health? Do you have high blood pressure? Do you smoke? They're going to ask you those things. Then they're going to say, here's how much your insurance is going to cost you. If you have a pre-existing condition, say you've had heart disease or a stroke or you have bad diabetes, it may be very expensive for you. They're going to charge you more. So you may find that you're going to instead go to Blue Cross, and the current law says that Blue Cross can't consider these health conditions. They're going to give you a good rate, and in return, Blue Cross doesn't pay state taxes. So we have a system set up for you if you have a pre-existing condition and you can't get insurance from another carrier. You have the option of going to Blue Cross, and we reward Blue Cross by having them not pay taxes. That's the current setup. And that was set up,
what, 1938?
Decades ago, yes.
Supposed to be non-profit, and therefore also they don't pay taxes, but they have to provide
care to people with a pre-existing
Absolutely.
condition. That's the trade-off. This is
That
the
was the
pact
trade.
they
Okay.
have with the people of Michigan that the legislature previously has established. Now what we have is, today we have Blue Cross coming back to the legislature, and they're saying, we don't like this agreement anymore. This isn't working for us. They're saying we want instead a system to cover people with a pre-existing condition, with diabetes that are expensive to insure, maybe heart disease or whatever the condition is. Instead, we want an assessment on all the insurance companies. They will pay into a pool that we, Blue Cross, will run. So we want all the insurance companies to chip in and pay in to what we call a high-risk pool. And then if you're a high-risk patient, you'll get insurance in this pool, and it'll be subsidized. Everyone will pay into this assessment, the other carriers, but
not just Blue Cross Blue Shield.
not just Blue Cross. All the private carriers will kick in, but Blue Cross will still keep our tax exemption. That's the proposal before us. Now, many states do have a high-risk pool that all the carriers chip into, but the ones that have done that, they then take away the tax exemption. They say you don't need that anymore because we've shifted that burden of taking the difficult to insure people. We've shifted that from you to the pool.
Well, we've leveled the playing field.
We've leveled the playing field.
And is there a cost? If that became law, would those insurance companies that operate independently outside of Blue Cross Blue Shield, would their rates have to go up? What happens to
Sure, I would think
cost?
they would, because they're now going to have to chip in for to cover this pool. They're going to be asked to chip in, and they're probably going to pass that on to the purchaser. So the people buying in the individual market, making that phone call, if they're getting insurance in the commercial market, they're going to have an extra fee tagged on to pay for these difficult to insure people that currently are being covered by Blue Cross. And if you're one of those difficult to insure people, you wouldn't go to Blue Cross, you'd go to the pool, and the rate for people in the pool will also be fairly high. It'll be probably 150 to 200% higher than everybody else's. So they're going to have to pay more too. And then Blue Cross, though, keeps its tax exemption. So that's the proposal in front of us today in our Health Policy Committee.
Well, Blue Cross might make the argument that because they have to insure everyone with pre-existing conditions, maybe some unhealthy individuals, and older individuals, as you said, who already tend to use
services
more, that they're incurring costs that are difficult to manage, and that the other companies are able to, quote unquote, cherry pick
Skim off the young, healthy people, sure.
But is there more to this than just that story? The reserves that Blue Cross Blue Shield tends to indicate is the amount they need to set aside for the really unhealthy and people with catastrophic conditions, illnesses, that it's growing and growing. It's over $2 billion now. How do you offset, or how do you really delineate between what is necessary reserves, what is surplus, and then apparently there's some desire, Blue Cross Blue Shield, now to get into the individual market and directly compete with some of that quote-unquote surplus, which really is born of the fact that they have a non-taxable situation. They're not taxed, as are the other companies.
It's easier